Hello, and welcome to Saving People, Queering Things, a supernatural podcast. We were previously known as Driver Picks the Podcast, and the episode you're about to listen to was recorded under that name. Though our name has changed as of season 3, our show hasn't changed that much. Our structure and theme-based discussions are the same, and we're so glad you're here. Now, let's get on the road. Hello, and welcome to Driver Picks the Podcast, the show where we talk about ghosts, road trips, and free will through every episode of the TV series Supernatural. Today, we are exploring Season 2, Episode 5, Simon Said, through the theme of Sanctuary. I am Abigail, your host, and joining me today are two very special guests from our podcast twin. So welcome to Jamie and Beth from the other Driver Picks the Podcast. Do you want to both introduce yourselves and tell our listeners anything you want them to know about you before we get started?
Yeah, did you want to start off?
You can go first.
Okay, I'll go first. My name's Beth, and I'm so excited to be here. I have watched Supernatural the whole way through from the very beginning, all through the very end. I started live watching at about season 10, and prior to that, I binged everything. So I am fully diagnosed Winchester derangement syndrome. I'm here for the long haul, hence starting a podcast about it. But clearly I'm in great company because I'm not the only one. So yeah, super
right down to the name.
Yeah, exactly. You've clearly got excellent taste. So
And I'm Jamie. I started watching Supernatural, 6 months ago?
by force, yes.
Yeah, by force. I never wanted to watch Supernatural. I saw what it had done to Bethany, God rest her soul. Decided I didn't want any of that. And then Bethany was like, well, why don't we start a podcast about it? I was like, well, I guess I've got to watch it now. But also she's forced to be friends with me as a result. So it kind of evens out. I'm midway through the second season in terms of where I've watched to. So I don't really understand a lot other than what I've seen on Tumblr. Yay.
Well, I'm so excited to be here with both of you. This is so much fun.
Yeah, we're thrilled. Honestly, we've both been so excited about this whole week. We've been like, oh my God, it's on Saturday.
Yeah, same, honestly, same. It's now time for our series recap, The Road So Far. After spending most of his adult life hunting for the demon who killed his wife, John Winchester is dead, having traded his life for Dean's, and the demon is still at large. Despite having no new leads, Sam and Dean are both avoiding their grief in different ways, but are still on the road. However, recent experiences suggest that monster hunting may not be as morally simple as John had taught them, after they have a blowout fight with another hunter and ultimately decide to let a group of non-murderous vampires go free. For now, though, most things that are not human are monsters that need to be ganked, and the Winchesters are continuing to hunt them while getting closer to understanding what happened to John, what happened to Sam, and where the demon may be now. That brings us to this episode and to our 30-second recap. So how this works is we will each get 30 seconds to recap what happens in this episode in whatever way you choose.
I think I'm ready.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so this episode's about a guy who's mind controlling people, right? Right. No, that's not the most important part of the episode. The important part of the episode is the van. We got to focus on this van for a full 30 seconds, okay? It's got a disco ball, it's got a tiger, it's got a barbarian queen riding a polar bear. That is all that really matters about this episode. I don't care what else happened. It's got the van with a polar bear. And Beth pointed this out to me while we were watching the episode. It's got the license plate Obi-Wan this.
It's R-U-O-B-1.
R-U-O-B-1. It's just the perfect van. All vans are creepy, but this one is just, it's a van. That was my 30 seconds.
That was amazing.
You're welcome.
That's not what I was expecting, but it was amazing.
It's not what I was expecting either. I thought you were going to go off about the lighting or Sam's hair, one of the two.
Which also would have worked. It's okay. There'll be space for that. There'll be time. We'll get there.
Perfect.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so a million things happen in this episode, but essentially it boils down to Sam has a vision. Some guy's going to go into a gun store. He's going to kill the guy. Then he's going to kill himself. Sam's like, no. So then he's like, Dean, we got to go. So then they go and then they find the guy who's going to shoot the guy. And then they're like, no. And so he doesn't shoot the guy, but he does walk in front of a bus, which is also bad. So then after that, Sam has a little moment. He's like, oh no, that was bad. I couldn't save him. And Dean's like, but you saved the other guy, so win. And then they figure out that there's this guy who's mind controlling, but he's not the actual villain. It's his evil twin. And I ran out of time.
Wow, that was fantastic. That was like very thorough. I'm very impressed. Yeah, can one of you get me in?
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so like Beth said, there are these twins, and one of them is evil, and one of them is not. One of them is using their mind control powers to kill people, and one is using them to fuck around and have a good time. So the one that's evil is going to kill this girl, and Sam and Dean intervene, but they're off doing their own thing and stopped, and then Andy, the good twin, kills the other twin, and then Sam had a whole crisis about what if that was me? What if I'm actually evil? What's the demon planned? Because it turns out these two were also affected by the same demon, and then they go to the roadhouse.
Perfect. I feel like between the three of us, we covered all the major points.
Yeah. The van.
See, but here's the thing. I just realized that we actually did miss one sort of massive point that's probably going to be significant moving forward.
Oh, yeah.
And that's that Sam is not vulnerable to the mind control.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Literally no one mentioned
kind of
arguably one of the important details in this episode, and everyone's like, nah, fuck that shit.
We also didn't really focus on the fact that it's the demon. I tried to shove it in
yeah.
at the end. I realized I had 4 seconds left, and I was like, I better talk about how the powers come from the demon somehow.
We were like, let's talk about this self-contained plot. No overarching themes here, no overarching plot. Nothing else is happening outside of this one episode.
Who needs it?
But hey, guess what? It's now time for us to discuss this episode more in depth through our chosen theme. And this week, our theme is Sanctuary. Maybe we'll just start there with my first note about Sanctuary was about how Dean, at the beginning of this episode, does not want to go to the roadhouse, does not think of it as a sanctuary or a safe place. To be fair, they haven't spent much time there, but is incredibly suspicious of other hunters, which is entirely John's doing. Fuck John for making Dean suspicious of every other hunter, because that's just really screwing them. That's just really screwing their lives up a lot.
It's a stupid decision, and we've talked about this a lot, and you guys I know have as well. He's not actually John. It's not actually a very good hunter.
No,
because he doesn't use the resources he has available to him, and he doesn't share them with his kids, who arguably are being put in way more fucking danger than they would be if he just gave them the information.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Make connections, take advantage of all of the resources that you have with all of these people that know you and know who you are and know who your kids are, but your kids don't know them because it's safe. It's safer.
Yeah, it's it's so much safer for these people with all this hunting experience to know all about your children, but the children to not have any idea who the fuck these people are.
So then and to be bred to be sort of suspicious of everyone who's not John, so that they never ever reach out.
I think it also doesn't help that John is very much, from what I can tell, a kill first, ask questions later sort of hunter.
He literally says that.
So
says that
Dean's entire worldview is if John found out about Sam and it wasn't Sam, if it was just another random kid who had psychic abilities, John would just murder him.
Which is depressing.
I'm not going to tell other hunters because they're going to be like Dad. They're going to be like John.
Oh yeah, I hadn't made that connection.
His entire framework for how hunters work is based on John, and then he's sort of transferring John's specific individual person traits onto the entire group of hunters as a whole.
Which is really interesting when we think about just 2 episodes ago, Gordon, because they've really just recently interacted with a hunter who is exactly like that, like John. And even more intense than John in a lot of ways. But who, Gordon's no, if they're not human, I kill them. Doesn't matter. Yeah. And so they've had that confirmed.
And what's really funny about that interaction with Sam and Dean and Gordon is that Dean starts off in that episode really relating to Gordon and really forming that connection with him and being he's, finally he's this guy who gets it and he understands me, and then by the end of the episode, he realizes, oh no, that's one sick and twisted, worldview. And it kind of takes that experience of him seeing it with Sam, because Dean would have just gone in and killed all those vampires with Gordon. He wouldn't have thought about it. But it took Sam being like, no, you need to take a step back. You can't see the bigger picture. And like having that interaction between the two of them to sort of overcome this like idea that Dean had initially of Gordon.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And that's interesting when you consider this episode, because they kind of get flipped a little bit in this episode where Sam is the one that's like, I don't know, maybe we're all monsters. And Dean's like, no, that's not what makes you a monster. Like what you do makes you a monster or not a monster.
Yeah.
Though I will say, like, I'm further ahead in my rewatch than here. Like I went back to rewatch this episode, but like for the first like season and a half, every time there is somebody who's even slightly misunderstood or slightly monstrous, Sam's like, oh no, I'm evil. And like, that's what he immediately jumps to.
Yeah. Which is like a wild sort of thing.
Yeah. There's no middle ground. He never is sort of like, oh, like maybe they're just being like, he's always like, no, they're a murderer, so I'm a murderer. Like
the show is like very heavy-handed about the like, every time we have a Sam mirror, Sam must have a crisis about his own humanity, which is just happens a lot in this first season and a half, especially when we don't know, because like we're starting to know, like we know it's the demon. We know that there's more than just Sam who've been affected. We don't actually really know anything else at this point. We just know his powers.
One thing that I wanted to mention was that when I first saw, like, you'd let us know in advance that the theme was going to be sanctuary. And when I first saw that, I was like, oh no, because I was trying to think back on the episode and I was like, sanctuary, like, what can I talk about that's sanctuary? Because to me, I'd always thought of sanctuary as like a place or like a building, and like less about it as like a metaphysical concept. So when I was like actually watching the episode, I was like, oh wait, no, this is amazing, because I was thinking about how sanctuary doesn't necessarily have to be a physical location. It can actually be like the sanctuary like within your own mind. And so like if I'm thinking about something, right, like you guys, I can tell you, I can choose to share it, but no one can pull it straight out of my head, and no one can influence me in the same way that we see in this episode. And it got me really thinking about like that idea of what it means to have sanctuary within yourself.
And yet you choose to share all your thoughts about Supernatural.
Look, it's a choice that I inflict upon everyone, isn't it?
We're inviting people into the sanctuary of our minds. Though, to be fair, when it's a Supernatural related sanctuary, it's
I don't know if I'd call it a sanctuary.
A sanctuary, hell house,
torture chamber,
Purgatory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't even know what that means.
No, I don't. See, this is when I was warning you earlier about how sometimes I make jokes about things I don't understand. This is what I'm talking about.
Very fitting. But no, I really like that idea, because I was kind of thinking about that as well, particularly with Sam in this episode, because like he is having, his mind is being affected. So he's like, that sanctuary is being taken from him by these like intrusive visions that he doesn't have control over, and he admits he doesn't have control over.
And even if they can sort of, like I said in my recap, they can save one person, they didn't save both. And then later in the episode, the woman who sets herself alight, you know, like they only had like 2 seconds notice on that one. Like it was kind of happening as Sam saw it, really. Which sort of like obviously is a bit of a bummer for them, because they don't really get a chance to do anything about it.
Like especially that second one, and it's very obvious that they sort of use that as a demonstration tactic, that it's like, it's definitely not Andy. Like all the other visions he's ever sort of had, they've been
sometimes days in advance.
So it's odd that this vision he doesn't have enough like sort of notice to theoretically be able to do something about it. Like he doesn't always practically have enough time to be able to do something about it, but like normally he has at least like a theoretical chance in hell of being able to help somebody with his visions. So it's interesting that they decided to make this one the one sort of exception to the rule where there's no time to do it, because it's not even confirmed in the episode that it actually was a premonition. It might just be an ordinary
in real time
vision, or he saw it in real time, or he saw it just after it happened. Like there is no real chance at all for him to be able to do anything, because there's no,
And
they don't even establish that it was a future vision, like it wasn't something happening in the future.
The fire truck goes past like immediately.
And it's which kind of implies that it was happening as he was having the vision, or like basically right on top of each other, which is an interesting you pointed that out, because it's not happened before, which is kind of just narratively convenient. Like you said, so like it's narratively convenient so they can get to the point where they're like, oh, Andy's not the bad guy really quickly. Otherwise it was going to take them a lot longer to get to Andy's not the bad guy.
And they didn't have time, especially considering how dead set Sam was, that like, no, this man is evil and like we have to stop him, you know.
The way they shot it, where it's like Sam's like, no, he's evil. And of course, because it's Sam, he's like, he's evil, so I am evil. But like,
he's like having a personal crisis as well as the like actual crisis that's happening.
But Sam's like, he's evil, and then it like cuts to Andy, and Andy's just chilling. He's driving around, he's walking down the street, like Andy has not a care in the world. He is so chill.
That is like the best adjective to describe Andy as a character, like chill.
Actually, watching it back this afternoon, I realized that Andy kind of reminds me, like his vibe, like his whole, like if you just like look at him and his like outfit and just the way he holds himself, it is very reminiscent for me of like N versus Cass. Which Jamie wouldn't get, but do you see what I mean? Like the vibe.
I see what you mean.
Yeah,
for like kind of different reasons, but also not entirely different reasons, honestly.
Like
interesting.
It's never occurred to me before, but as I was watching it, I was like, oh, like if you put those two characters side by side, I think they'd be best friends. Like
I think they would get along. That's amazing. That's hilarious. That's great. I love that. For those of you who are listening who have any idea what we're talking about, you'll appreciate that. And for the rest of you, stick around for multiple seasons, and eventually that reference will make sense.
Eventually you come back and listen to this and go, oh, well, that makes sense now. Or you might think I was wrong. So
if she's wrong, go to Tumblr and attack her.
Hey.
You're gonna get a message in 4 years.
Yeah, and it's just like, I just listened to this episode and fuck you.
I disagree. There is no connection. They're not similar at all. They would hate each other, actually.
While this kind of builds on to like the point I had before about like the concept of like your mind being invaded, but from that I kind of started thinking about what sanctuary means in terms of like how you identify. So like how you feel comfortable expressing yourself. And I'm pretty sure later in your episodes, usually you talk about like gender as like a specific topic. So this is kind of getting into that a little bit like prematurely, but I wanted to like point out that not only like could you just apply that to like anyone, but particularly within Supernatural, I think like Dean in particular definitely has his like expression of his identity versus like necessarily what might be an identity that he kind of keeps more to himself, or like comes out more when he's more comfortable, or depending on what situation he's in or who he's with. And I just thought like, just while we were on the topic of it, I thought it was like interesting to like think of as like a concept.
Which is interesting in this episode too, even with like Andy, because Andy also has this like identity persona that he's kind of crafted and that his powers are a part of, but it's also like his whole chill vibe is sort of a presentation to the world of who he is.
It's almost, it's not quite performative, but it kind of is. Like it's just like a little bit performative, I think.
And it which like makes sense, because like I don't know, at least I've had this experience definitely of like you're always kind of sorting out like what of these things that I'm doing are performative and what of them are genuine, and then those sometimes change and switch, and sometimes you perform something for so long that it becomes sort of the reality, or vice versa, or like all of a sudden one day you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm only performing this now, it's not actually true anymore. And it's
definitely a journey that I think everyone probably goes on in some like in some form or other.
I also wanted to talk about sanctuary in relation to adoption. Because I think that's a really interesting point to make with this episode. And just the fact that the way like they are twins, they genetically are not dissimilar. The difference between Weber and Andy and having that sanctuary of home, like it's never confirmed that Weber had like a bad childhood or anything, but the difference in terms of like a sanctuary and a base growing up can have on the person you become.
Yeah.
And that's also relevant in terms of like Sam and Dean, and like growing up, the only real sanctuary they had was
each other in the
car. Because if you try to tell me that John Winchester was a sanctuary, I would probably fist fight you in a parking lot.
No, absolutely not. John Winchester, nope. I'm giving a thumbs down to John Winchester as the idea of a sanctuary. I definitely wrote notes about them being a sanctuary for each other and about the car being a sanctuary. But yeah. Well, and that's interesting with the other two brothers that are kind of being contrasted with Sam and Dean, because Supernatural is like sibling sets.
Yeah.
Contrast them with Sam and Dean every 4 episodes.
Yeah. We love our parallels in this fandom
so much. Again, intentional or unintentional. What I found interesting about this particular contrast is, like these are brothers that have been separated and haven't had the sanctuary of each other, and like the is it Weber like identifies that as like the source.
I think his actual name's Ansem or something, but I'm just referring to him as Weber because Ansem sounds like a stupid name.
Rip to anyone if that's your name.
Well, it's not just that his name's Ansem, it's that it's Ansem Weed.
It's just like a weird.
Sorry, it's got a not a.
Yeah, it's a strange name.
It's a strange choice.
Name.
They made some choices there.
Yeah.
I don't know why they made those choices. Speaking of names, though, we watched it with the captions on, and they spell Weber with 1 B.
Which, yeah.
At least on our captions, it was like Weber.
I don't remember if it was 1 B or 2 Bs with my captions, but
when I say I fixate on nonsensical things, this is what I mean. They spelled it with 1 B, and I thought that was really fucking weird.
Yeah, I wouldn't pronounce it that way if it was 1 B.
No.
I would pronounce it differently. But anyway,
so in my brain it's double B.
Yeah, that's my brain as well. With like Weber or Ansem or whatever, that dude, like he even identifies that it's the lack of like relationship with his brother that's like that's what he credits with the fact that he's decided to kill a whole bunch of people, which cool motive, still murder.
Yeah.
But that's interesting because that's Dean spends a lot of different instances in this episode, like telling Sam, like, no, you're not a murderer. No, you're not the monster. No, you're not going to go dark side, like over and over and over. And he's telling Sam this. And you're getting that contrasted with like these brothers who don't know each other and who isn't. And like Andy, who is unable to talk his brother off the ledge. Like he's unable to. And he does end up having to he does end up killing his brother because he can't stop him from being evil, which you're getting that what is going to happen with Sam and like what happens if something with Sam and we don't know.
Yeah. And it kind of ties into like a broader theme of Supernatural as well, which is the concept that family doesn't end with blood, but it also doesn't start there. Like Andy and Weber were like obviously genetically siblings, but emotionally, socially, culturally, they weren't. They were no different like to strangers on the street.
Well, and they didn't know they were siblings for a long time.
Yeah, and I mean Andy didn't even know they were siblings until like, a day before he killed him. So, whereas you contrast that with Sam and Dean, who like, yes, are genetically related, but like also have actually, grown up together and have that, they know each other back to front. And,
well, isn't there another Winchester brother that they don't know? I
mean, I can't tell you that.
Doesn't he get stuck in hell or some shit? Because then they just completely forget about him.
I feel like the struggle that I have to go through.
It's so difficult to move on
I can't
from
tell you if you are right or wrong.
You're like, that's an interesting theory, Jamie. Interesting observation you've made there.
Because I'm pretty sure he's played by like Jake Abel, which like I know because I was in another fandom that he was in the movie of. for. So.
Jamie like weirdly knows a bunch of actors from Supernatural, but from other things.
Right. Because I mean, Supernatural's had 8 million actors over 15 years.
Yeah.
Because everyone's
hilarious.
Is dead.
So after this, we're planning on watching Leverage. And basically there's this fun character in it. And I was like, oh, what else has he been in? Because I really like him as an actor. And he was in Supernatural. And I'm like, oh, I was like, oh, hey, Bethany, have you heard this name?
Just you wait, because you're about to lose your mind. Jamie.
I don't remember his character name.
I think is it Jake?
Yeah, it's Jake.
Okay, so Jamie says to me, Bethany, who's Jake in Supernatural? Do you know who Jake is? Do you remember by name who Jake is in Supernatural? Because I didn't.
I'm not sure.
Right? Because the only name that I could think of Jake related to Supernatural is Jake Abel.
Yeah,
right?
That's the only one I can think of too.
Can you grab your phone right now and type in Jake Supernatural and look at what this character is used for? Because I could not believe I didn't realize who this was.
If it helps, the actor's name is Aldous Hodge.
Yeah, so just like Aldous Hodge Supernatural.
Aldous?
Yeah, Aldis.
Speaking of strange names.
Oh my gosh.
Like, yeah, right.
Gosh.
Like it's so important. And I
it's such an important.
Forgot.
That's so important. Oh man. And very relevant. Like very relevant.
And Jamie's like, oh, I'm like, who the fuck is Jake? I'm thinking it must be some background character who's in like who like doesn't matter. And I looked up and I was like, oh,
you're
I know who that is.
You're like, this is significant.
Significant.
You will know, Jamie.
Yeah. You'll know soon.
You'll know very so soon. It'll be fantastic.
I'm so glad it wasn't just me who did not know who that was, because I was like, who the fuck is that?
No idea. Yeah,
no, because I was like, there's an odd amount of like, not a lot of Leverage fan fiction, but there's a lot of it that's like, I think we did the math and it was like 40% of Leverage fan fiction is Leverage crossover with Supernatural fan fiction.
Of course it is. I mean, if it's
so much, and I kept on seeing all these fics that were tagged like, you know, we meet Jake's twin, and I'm like,
we do. So love
he must be a character named Jake. Like,
and there I can see. Not that I know anything about Leverage, but I can see based on that the character in Supernatural, it being very ripe for the crossing over sort of fics.
But yeah, so she had no idea, and apparently they're really significant in the second season of Supernatural.
Yeah. Which, you know, you're like, when did they become significant? I've seen up to the 8th.
Like, I'm running out of time.
Don't worry, it'll hit you right in the face, and you'll be like, oh, okay, I get it.
But yeah, sorry, I sidetracked us.
Oh, it's great. I do not remember what we were talking about, but it's good. What was I going to say? Okay. Just a short sanctuary note was Dean in the car with his burrito or whatever gas station food. When he says, one day I'd like to sit down and eat something I didn't have to microwave at a mini mart. I was like, oh boy, sanctuary reference, you know, just that idea of like, Dean never had a stable home and doesn't usually voice that as like something he wants. Like he usually pushes back against that when Sam wants it. But yeah, go ahead.
When we were watching, I'm like, well, hasn't he even been to like a restaurant? Like he thinks.
I think he's referring to cooking though. I think he's referring to like him being able to cook food in a place that's like, not.
And Bethany was like, oh, they don't have time for that and it'd be too expensive. I'm like, they could go to McDonald's.
Also, they eat at diners all the time. So
that's
they do.
True. Yeah.
Like, because like he doesn't say like, oh, like I'd like to be able to like, you know, cook my own food properly. Or
but does he
just
ever
goes
say
like, I'd like
directly?
to sit down and eat a meal sometime. It's like
Abigail makes a great point. Does he ever say anything that he means?
Like directly? Or does he like sort of half say it? And you'd have to like dig at it to be like, what do you really mean by this?
Yeah. And I think we actually repression boy. We were talking about this actually a couple of episodes back when we recorded Tall Tales, and Sam's complaining about, you know, your food in the fridge that's disgusting and you've left your socks in the sink. And I was like, I couldn't believe that this was the sort of stuff that Dean was doing, because like in later seasons, like he's such a like neat freak and like he takes such pride in like his environment. And we were actually talking about how, like, I think it's because at that point it is his space that he owns. Like, he's never had that before. The closest he's ever had is baby, and we know he takes meticulous care of baby.
But he doesn't care about some place they're going to be for like 2 nights. Like, who gives a shit about that?
Yeah, I'll leave my socks in the sink. Who gives a shit? You know, it's different.
Right, but like, don't, if you eat in baby, you better not spill, because you know, we're
not letting a dog in the car, Sam, obviously.
I mean, he must not care too much about the car. He just straight up gave it away in this episode.
When I say that I watch that scene and I'm like, don't do it every time. Even though I'm like, I know it's fine. Every time I'm just like, watch the car drive away and he's like standing there, like looking confused.
When Sam sees the car go by with Andy behind the wheel, and he's just like, the look on his face, like, what, how, like trying to like piece together in his mind how that could possibly have happened. Oh
yeah, it's
poetic cinema.
Actually, in that case, it's kind of funny that they lose the car in this episode, because that's like, not only is like Andy like invaded the sanctuary of Dean's mind, but he's also removed from him the only sanctuary he has in a physical space, which is the car.
Which he just
straight up drives it away. Yeah, which he just put all that time and energy into rebuilding as well.
Which he rebuilt in the wake of like losing John.
Ooh.
Like,
we lost you for a second there.
Oh, am I back now?
You're back now.
Okay, I'll say that again in case it didn't pick up. But he rebuilt the Impala in the wake of losing John, which he had just gone through this whole arc of like kind of having his opinions and like relationship with John sort of like uprooted. Like his ideas of John have been like uprooted in the first season. So even if he thought of John as any kind of sanctuary, he doesn't anymore. And then the car he rebuilds, and then the car gets stolen from him, and like, it's just, I'm actually surprised he's not angrier with Andy when they get they kind of gloss over the getting the car back, and he doesn't.
I think it's because he respects him, because like Andy does the whole thing about like, oh, it's, you know, Impala's best year, and like I think Dean and Andy also, if they got to spend more time together, would also be besties.
I did not realize, I remembered this wrong. I thought that Dean and Andy like had a lot more like
animosity.
Yeah, and they were all like buddy, and Dean was like, no, I like this guy, like multiple times, which was surprising to me because I'd forgotten that was the case. I forgot that Sam was the more suspicious one in this episode.
Oh, 100%. But that's because I think Sam's doing that whole like, I see myself in you kind of like mentality, where Dean's like trying to see the best in Sam, therefore trying to see the best in Andy. He's like, well, you know, I have to prove that you're not an evil, monstrous killer, because that way I can sort of prove to Sam that he's not an evil, monstrous killer.
Right. Because again, Sam sees somebody who has the potential to be dangerous, and he's like, oh, that's me. I is dangerous. I is going to become a murderer. Oops.
And then Sam's logic too in this episode is he's like, but I am a murderer. Like I kill things all the time, and you're like, Sam, let's slow down a little bit here. like
Sam, I killed a mosquito literally like 2 hours ago. Am I a monster? Like,
yes, they are a vital part of our ecosystem, Bethany.
It's funny though, like it's almost like this episode is more related to like the disruption of sanctuary.
Yeah.
You know, like it's like all of everyone's sanctuaries being invaded or like changed in some fundamental way, rather than like being able to find a safe sanctuary.
Because even at the top of the episode, there is a line where Dean calls Sam a freak, and it's like Sam's sanctuary, like a lot of it is Dean now. Like since Just died, Dean is Sam's sanctuary, and so for that safe space and that sanctuary to be suddenly hostile, by Dean's perception of Sam as a freak, completely obliterates a whole bunch of the sense and of trust that he has in his brother.
That's really
and
true.
Not only does that happen, but then like 3 minutes later in a later scene, he describes both himself and all the other children who have powers as freaks.
Like Sam really takes that on board. We actually talked about this in our episode as well, but And like
not in relation to Sanctuary.
Not in relation to Sanctuary, but just like that monumental moment when Dean actually says, like, calls him a freak, because it's like the first time that Dean has said anything. Like, it's not like, oh, your freaky powers. It's like, you're a freak.
It's an identifier, as opposed, it's that like identity piece, like you said earlier. It's that sense of like, who are you and what is performance and what is perception and what's like real. And that's like Dean making it more real.
Yeah. And the reason I brought it up in our episode was because it becomes like, if anyone's seen the show, like Sam and the word freak become like, he uses it eternally. And this is the first time it's used in the show. And I didn't realize, but it's like, oh, this moment, like Sam carries that with him forever. Like he uses this as terminology in like season 14. Like it sticks with him. Like this is a barb that cut deep.
Yeah. And and because it was, you know, for like Dean, it was like you can tell even in that scene, like he immediately realizes not the full extent to which it's going to cause harm for Sam, but he realizes and tries to backtrack, but like
immediately, but he can't. It's the damage is done.
The damage is done, and like those words are going to be a source of the back and forth. And like this episode is a kind of a little microcosm of the conflict that they're going to continue to have around like who Sam is and what Sam can do and Sam's powers, and like how Dean perceives him based on those powers.
Yeah.
And how Dean is like constantly kind of going, like swinging the pendulum between like, you're a freak, you're not a monster. Like you can be like, you're a good person, you're saving people, to like, actually, I am a little scared of you. I am a little scared of what might happen, what you might do. Like even in this episode, he swings back and forth, and it comes out when he's like, when Andy tells him to tell the truth, and like.
Yeah. And it's also like Sam has sanctuary in Dean in a way that Dean, I mean, this is a lot of like my opinion bleeding in, so like take it or leave it. But like, in my opinion, because Dean has more of a parental relationship over Sam, it means that there are certain things that he doesn't feel he can discuss with Sam because it would be burdening him. Whereas like Sam, because he's got more like of that child to parent relationship, like, so Sam can find more sanctuary in Dean than Dean feels comfortable finding in Sam. So the fear of Sam maybe not being okay, maybe I can't save Sam, is not something that Dean can confide in with Sam, because that would be like, he can't say that to his kid.
No, why not? John did.
Well, fuck John. So
John doesn't count as a parental figure in this show. He barely counts as a functional adult.
But that actually connects to something I was thinking about during this episode, because like Sam, because he's kind of had that model, even though it's like really fucked up that his brother is his model for a parent, even because he's had that experience of like being able to take sanctuary in someone else, he can. So even like with Ellen, like we see as soon as they start talking to Ellen, Sam like just spills, like tells it all, and like tells about his powers, and like shows this like level of trust with Ellen, like takes sanctuary in like her as a trustworthy person, really
as a maternal figure too.
Yeah. And Dean is like, it takes him a lot longer to get, like from the beginning of the episode, he's like, I don't want to go to the roadhouse, I don't trust other hunters. And then he's like, this is family business, we're gonna deal with it on our own. Like he doesn't, but he's not had ever in his life, other than when he was like an infant, an example of like an adult figure to take sanctuary in. So he doesn't have any experience in it. So he's not like, that's not his go-to to be like, oh, you know, adults can be helpful. We could maybe be stronger if we get support. He's like, no, like.
Yeah. And it's like Jamie's point from earlier as well, where we were talking about like John teaching them like mistrust in other hunters and like, you know, not exposing them to other people. But it's this idea where like, if we're going to say that Sam has like sort of is modeling Dean's parenting, I guess, then Dean is modeling John's. So like John would not have trusted Ellen, therefore Dean is not going to trust Ellen with this information. But Sam, who like has seen like Dean growing up and is like, oh, okay, well, Dean would have been more likely to trust say Bobby, right? So Sam is like, okay, and would equate Ellen to like Bobby. I don't know if that makes sense. Like,
No,
I
it
feel like I'm
does.
using a lot of hand gestures to explain my point, so I don't know if it's going to come across, but if that makes sense, like, you know, Sam is more modeling Dean and Dean is modeling John, but by the time it gets to Sam, it's kind of diluted, I guess.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I don't have anything else to
Okay,
say
good.
about that. It does make sense. And hopefully it'll make sense to people beyond us.
Don't look at me. I barely watched the show, so
There we go.
nothing makes sense.
Was there anything else related to either the theme or just things in general you wanted to be like, let's talk about? If it's lore related, we'll talk about it in a little bit. And also if it's gender related, we'll talk about it in a little bit. But anything other than that?
I spotted on your notes that you have a note about how PBR is a shitty beer.
Oh, yes.
One thing I noticed that I didn't notice on my original watch of this episode is that basically Ash trades one PBR for 15 minutes of his time, which as an IT professional, he should be making way more money than that, because a PBR is what, like $5?
Yeah, something like that.
That's like $20 like he should
And
be
$5
making at least $30
can't even
an
be
hour.
that.
He should value his skills.
Yeah. Like this is back in like 2006, probably not even $5.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Got to account for that inflation.
Probably like a $3 beer. It's like,
Yeah, like I get paid more than that, and I work in fast food. Like,
so yeah. So Ash,
Yeah.
this is our note to you. Charge more for your services.
Charge more for your
If we were to do
Know
a
your
PSA
value.
like you do in your show, that would be the PSA. It's like, if you work in IT, charge more for your services.
Oh, I love that. I didn't have anything else quite as fun, but I had a couple other notes about Sanctuary, and I might just read my notes out, and then if we want to expand on them, we can.
Yeah.
But I had a note about the yellow-eyed demon actually is ruining the sanctuary that is the home for the people that's visited. So like the demon ruined the sanctuary that was the Winchester home and ruined the sanctuary that was the Gallagher home, you know, by coming in and disrupting it. But also that we sort of covered this, I guess, a little bit before, but the sanctuary of your own reality and your own sanity, because we see a lot in this episode, like, for example, Tracy, who is Andy's like sort of girlfriend, not really, who like her entire reality, like, I mean, to be fair, everyone in this show's kind of reality has changed, but her perception of Andy and maybe of what their relationship was, because he had never used that power on her. And I honestly think it's tragic that that relationship kind of got ruined, because she doesn't know that anymore. And she doesn't know anymore.
And also, we know as the audience that Andy never used his powers on her, but she doesn't know that.
Exactly. She doesn't know that. And honestly, like in her situation, I'd probably also be like, you know what? This doesn't feel, it's not a sanctuary anymore. It can't be. It's like sometimes.
How can you trust her once that sanctuary's been violated? Like the sanctuary of being able to assume that people can't control what you think or do.
Yeah. And even towards the end of the episode, I made a note about there being a sanctuary found in knowledge and in a plan. Because when they're talking to Ellen, she's saying to them, look, guys, this is not your war. This is just a war in general. We're all part of it. And unlike John, we need to prioritize sharing what information we have. So if you know something, you have to tell us. And it becomes this, you know, within like knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
So the more knowledge that you have collectively as a group, and she makes the point, like at the moment, the other side holds all the cards. Like they have sanctuary in the fact that they're safe behind their wall of information, and these guys are kind of plodding along in their own little areas,
running blind, really, just trying. They're just like trying shit and hoping it works.
They're like, let's fuck around and find out. But so if they can share that knowledge, they can build their own sanctuary, their own safe space within the confines of that knowledge. Which at the moment, like everyone's just kind of doing their own shit.
Which is
crossing their fingers, hoping for the best.
And which is really like fitting then that scene happens in the roadhouse, which is like this physical representation of like a sanctuary for hunters.
Yeah.
And that place where they're building the
and also a sanctuary that they initially refused, but now are coming to accept as a sanctuary.
Yeah. It's a full circle.
Mm-hmm. They're breaking the patterns that John has like tried to ingrain in them. John's being proven wrong, and they're actually like
I would say thank God, but I have a feeling that has other connotations.
Yeah. Like we won't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
No.
We'll get there.
That's a whole different discussion. But I love that. And I love what Ellen says, where Ellen says, you know, at best, all we got is us together. No secrets or half-truths here.
Yeah.
And like, that's almost her, like I wrote a note that like, that's her staking claim to the Winchesters as part of the hunter community. And saying, you know, you might think that this is just your family's thing. You might think that you're okay just like dealing with this on your own. She's like, but that's not the reality. And also like, I think she knows that, you know, they need, yes, obviously the Winchesters have resources and skills and knowledge that will benefit all of the hunters, but really like the Winchesters need the other hunters more than the hunters need the Winchesters at this point in the show.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, up until like 6 months ago, they still thought vampires were fucking extinct. So,
so like they need other hunters desperately. This is Ellen being like, you are tiny children.
Yeah.
We are taking you in.
And we are already at a point in the season where we know more of this. So like, I don't know if you maybe want to leave this out when you do your final edit, but one thing that is kind of relevant to this is the fact that Ellen's husband died because John didn't give him all the information.
Which we're going to know in the next episode. Or the next episode.
So it's like, it's also that extra layer of like, she is fully aware of the consequences of people not sharing this kind of information.
Yeah.
Whereas like Sam and Dean, because they've sort of been so sheltered from it all by John, they don't really have so much of an idea at this point in time of the consequences of not being like open source, essentially.
Right. Because they've only lost they've lost other people as well, for sure. But like John is that the reason they lost John was not because of that. That's really interesting. And that makes makes me love Ellen even more, because
I love her. Her and Joe
makes that choice to like welcome them in despite what she knows about them and their family. She goes, I'm not going to hold you accountable for like your parents' shitty decisions.
Yeah.
Because you don't deserve that either.
I really wish we got like more interaction between like Bobby and Ellen.
Yes.
Because I think that between the two of them, they're like the ultimate like parental figures that like Sam and Dean actually needed.
Yes, they really are. I feel like fandom has ruined me for the Bobby Ellen sort of like dynamic, because I always assume that they just have way more relationship than we get shown in the show. Always expecting them to be around each other.
In my mind, the Roadhouse is like next door to Bobby's salvage yard. Like that's in my brain. That's how it works. But then I watch the show and I'm like, oh fuck, they're like hours from each other. Like they don't really talk.
I can't picture a map of the states in my brain, but like South Dakota and Oklahoma are not that. I don't know how long it would be.
I couldn't tell you. American states compared to Australian states are very confusing. Their states are like tiny, comparatively.
It's
in
similar
terms
to like
of comparison for size,
Yeah.
Australia is like, I think we're like 80% the size of America. So like we're only like a little bit smaller than America. We have 6 states and territories?
Yeah.
They have 50 something.
I think your states are a lot more similar in size, maybe a little smaller. Like I think they're a little bit smaller than ours just because proportionally.
Depends on the state.
But like we are like our provinces are in Canada are very large as well. So we have 13. We have 10 provinces and 3 territories. That's it. I'm like
it's funny you run into, I don't know if you've had this, but like I've run into tourists before and they've said to us like, we're like, oh, like where are you going? And they're like from America. And they're like, oh, we're driving from Perth. We're trying to get to Melbourne. And we're like, how long have you been driving? They're like, oh, like a few days. We're hoping to get there in the next couple of hours. We're like, oh, buddy, no, you're like halfway. Like, how long have you got this rental car for? They're like, oh, only a week. We're like, you should turn around.
Like, you will not make it back. that would be like Canada.
Because they're like, oh, it's only 3 states. It's like, yeah, bro, but like our states.
But like, have you looked at a map? Have you looked at how big states are? Because they're not all tiny. You can drive through a state in like a few hours pretty easily.
Yeah, which is like what the next major city to us is like at least 8-hour drive.
No, it's more like 12.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. More like 12.
Yeah. So yeah,
it'd be a bit different if we were in like Melbourne or Sydney or something, because they're quite close to each other.
Yeah.
But where we are, like, nah, it's like, I think from here to Sydney, it's something like a 18-hour drive or some shit.
Wow.
Yeah.
I am now looking it up because now I need to know how far apart the roadhouse and is from.
I would be intrigued, right, to find out how long it would take the brothers to drive from place to place. So like if we had like Bobby's, like the bunker, the roadhouse, and like, I don't know, what's like one other major?
I mean, like Lawrence is a big one, but like they all spend a lot of time in Chicago. There's a lot of big stuff that happens in Chicago for some reason. It just happens to be like a thing that is.
I remember seeing someone on Tumblr did like a calculation at some point, like how far they had traveled.
Oh, yeah, I think
hours.
I've seen that.
Yeah, so that's the equivalent of us driving like interstate.
Yeah, so that's like it's because they're like several.
But not just interstate, because you can get to the closest state in just like a couple of hours from where we live.
That's crazy. Right. Yeah, it's just the city.
Yeah,
but to get to the city, you have to do another like 8 hours of driving.
This is driving through 4 states. Like they're like pretty crazy. I mean, I'm just like, this is just mapping the states, not like the specific places, but it's still telling us that like the roadhouse.
If they were closer to the border, it'd be a couple of hours shorter, but it's not like.
It's at least like probably 8 to 10 hours.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
You
can listen to Taylor Swift albums. Oh, so many. I would love that.
Let's do them up. How many Taylor Swift albums?
Could you listen to her whole discography in the drive between Ellen and Bobby's? And how many times has Dean done that?
How many 10-minute all too wells could we get through?
So many. The answer is so many.
Well, look, I'm glad we've answered that question. It's perfect.
Yeah.
In Beth and Jamie tradition, we never get through an episode without having to Google something.
Oh,
so
sometimes you Google
every time.
3 things.
Every time. I made my note. Well, I think we'll end our like general episode discussion there. Before we add too much more to anything. So the next thing, Beth, this is
sorry.
So I just Googled it for reference about how big like Australia is. So to drive from Perth to Melbourne, it's a 36-hour drive.
That's wow.
Without stopping.
That's
like from one end to the other.
That's from basically one side of the country to the other. That's not even like if you were going to Queensland or something, it'd be longer again.
Wow.
It's like from left to right.
Yeah. So when we say that tourists get lost and they're like, oh, we've been driving for like 3 days. We're hoping to get there in the next couple of hours. Like, no, honey, you're still like 3 days away.
Yeah. See, that's like driving.
Oh, I really love seeing like for context, like what other countries are like. It's very interesting to me.
Yeah. So like driving from Victoria, so like where I live, to oh, maybe I shouldn't say that. Anyway, driving from British Columbia to Toronto. It's like 40 hours.
Similar distance.
Similar distance. I didn't realize. I think I forget how big Australia is.
Yeah.
A
lot of people do.
Big. It's because we've got a relatively small population considering the landmass, because so much of it is like uninhabitable.
So do we, for the same reasons. We're uninhabitable for like the opposite reasons you're uninhabitable.
Yeah.
It's just like too fucking cold here for anyone to like live very far. Like I think like something like 80% of the population of Canada lives within 100 miles of the US border.
Yeah, do you know, it's something like, I think a similar statistic of our population lives like along the East Coast.
Yeah.
That makes
I think
sense.
it's about 60% of our total population lives in like the
outer rim.
The outer rim.
Yeah.
Just of the eastern states, none of the others.
Yeah.
No. Well, we're going to move from episode discussion. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pick a theme song for the week. This can be any genre, any type of song. I have one. If either of you have one that suits.
I also do have one. I don't think I took this anywhere near as seriously as you will have, but I did think of a song.
I'm so happy that you thought of a song. Can you tell us what your song is?
So in honor of them all gaining their powers on their 22nd birthday, it's 22 by Taylor Swift.
Oh, I love that. I love that. No, I wanted like a really dark, like I really wanted like a dark acoustic version of that song.
Yeah.
Just matches with the tragedy of all these kids' lives.
I love it. I had a song which is not so much, it's not about the song itself, it's just about the title. So I went with We Didn't Start the Fire.
You might as well have gone with fucking Midnight Oil Beds of Burning.
They didn't set the ball rolling. They didn't start the fire. They're just living with the consequences. So it's accurate.
It actually does work. If not in tone, if in like literal words and theme, it does. I love that. I love that I love both of those so much. So the one song I'm gonna add is actually
22 much better fits the vibe of like Andy versus Sam though.
Yeah,
because Andy's like, I turned 22, I got these powers, it's fucking great.
It's lit, yeah.
It's true. The song, I was watching something else and they had this song playing and I was like, literally right before we came on to record this, and I was like, this actually works. And it's Enemy by Imagine Dragons, which is like it's a new Imagine Dragons song. I'm gonna like look up a lyric because there was a lyric right near the beginning where I was like, ooh, it's like this song is in the new anime series called Arcane that my partner's watching and really loving.
Oh,
so we
one
watched
of my
like
roommates is watching that.
We watched the first like 20 minutes of it today because he really wanted to show me it. But there was just a couple lyrics where I was like, ooh, like,
oh, everybody wants to be my enemy. Sam coded.
Yeah, it's a very Sam song, which is why I was like, ooh, I think it works for this episode. It's just like, everyone wants to be my enemy, spare the sympathy, look out for yourself.
That's like Dean in the background, like, look out for yourself, Sammy.
Yeah.
And Sam's like, look, it's my enemy. Look, it's my enemy.
Yeah, there's just a bunch of like, the road is long, so put the pedal into the floor. The enemy's on my trail, my energy unavailable.
Oh, that's so good.
It hits all the Sam emotions of this episode. So I like this progression. Our soundtrack for this episode is 22 by Taylor Swift. Start the Fire and Enemy. So please, if you listen to these in a row and think of this episode, please tell us what that stirs up in you. Because
that's so funny.
I find really funny though is we kind of
do a playlist. Yes,
I'm gonna make a playlist with all the seasons.
I would love that.
Yeah.
We kind of hit the different characters though, because my song is about Andy, your song's kind of about Dean, and hers is Sam coded.
Perfect. Look at us go, covering all our bases.
Yeah,
I really love actually looking at one of these like quotes here, like one of the lyrics. I've been out of shape thinking out the box. I'm an astronaut. And like Sam being like so out of the loop, like he's only really come into hunting in the last like year, and like he was like been so out of it. Like I blasted off the planet rock to cause catastrophe, and it matters more because I had it not. Like it's had I thought about wreaking havoc on an opposition, kind of shocking they wanted static with precision. Like that's like it's very apt.
It's very Sam coded. It's very much like his whole process in this season of like, yeah, he's come back in now and he's got all these powers and he has no idea what's going on with them, but he's got this sense of destiny / doom and we're not sure which one.
Let's go. Oh, I'm gonna listen to that before I go to bed tonight. I'm gonna be bopping away. It's gonna be great.
It's great. I'm very happy with this.
I'll never be a saint. No way. Oh,
it's just like way too fitting.
Yeah.
way too fitting here. Even more than like, and honestly chose it based on like listening to like the first 30 seconds of it in Arcane and chose it and then went like, oh wow, this really works on multiple levels. These lyrics are very...
Isn't that funny how that happens sometimes?
Yeah.
Like you just pick something on a whim and you're like, oh shit, this works like a million times better than I thought.
So fun.
Accidents don't happen accidentally.
So next we're going to move into our going meta segment where we're tracking lore, the Bechdel test, pop culture, all this fun stuff. First off, we have our death counter. So the saga around this, Jamie, has been that I originally was like, we're just going to track significant deaths. And then one of my co-hosts was like, no, we have to talk about everyone who's died because they all matter. So I changed the segment because he bugged me about it in 4 different episodes. So I was like, fine, I'll change it. You're welcome, Jacob. So now we track all of them. So meaningful human lives in this episode that do not survive. We have the guy at the beginning or like a kind of, because then it doesn't end up happening, so it doesn't really count.
He dies in a vision.
The guy in the
vision.
Store,
He doesn't actually die. But like Dr. Jennings, Holly, and again, the woman on the bridge is just a vision again. So
Tracy.
Tracy, yeah. So we really only have I think we only actually have two
actual two
on screen.
Weber, of course.
Oh, and Weber,
yeah. That's incredibly plot relevant.
Though when I wouldn't put him in significant deaths because he's not significant. Actually, we would
have significant really moving forward, but he's significant in this episode.
Yeah, he's the main problem of this episode.
Yeah, and he's significant.
Directly causes the other deaths.
And he's significant because, like, when we've been talking like significant deaths, like we've been talking like major characters. Like so far, we've had like Mary, Jess, and John have made this list. But I almost like there's almost a rationale for putting Weber in there because he's one of these children,
special children.
I think we may have also put in season 1. I'm blanking on his name.
Max.
I think we also put Max on the major characters because of just like his significance as another one of the
and the overarching plot.
So next we have the Bechdel test. Does this episode pass the Bechdel test?
No.
It
has one female named character. It's already falling at the first obstacle.
No, we have Ellen and Joe.
Ellen, Joe, Holly, and Tracy are the 4.
Yeah. And Ellen and Joe
characters
have an interaction where Ellen is like, go grab a case of beer.
Yeah, it's technically not about men, but it's kind of for the service of men.
Yeah. I don't like it. If it passes, it's like a, C- pass. Like technically passed, but like
you're on thin fucking ice.
Yeah.
I feel like it's definitely the interaction they have is certainly under a minute. So I feel like to me that like I wouldn't personally class it as a pass. I don't know if it passes on technicality. But it's also not
actually a conversation.
True.
It's like
it's like two lines
says
back and
one
forth.
thing to her and then she walks away and goes.
No, they do go back and forth. It is like there is like more than one line each.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, technicality. I don't.
Isn't it sad that like this is the point that we're like, well, they did have more than one line. So is this representation? It's like that meme where it's like the little butterfly. It's like, oh, is this a good female character? Like.
Yeah. So Supernatural, do better challenge.
I feel like it's a little late now. I hate to inform you of this, but it did in fact end last year.
It doesn't feel like it did. It doesn't ever end if you don't let it.
It might just be that Supernatural is the most true show for that.
Yeah.
It might just never end. It might just continue to create more content forever.
Well, Jensen's gonna do his prequel, so I said to Jamie, I was like, we're never gonna run out of content because by the time we finish the initial series, the prequel will have released. We can start on that. It'll be great.
I kind of like want to like if that actually happens, if there's any kind of spin-off show, I kind of want to do it like a live Like,
Yes.
do it as it's airing. When you, I also have no idea how it's going to end up because it sounds.
Yeah.
Fucking neighbors.
Oh, stupid neighbors. Sorry, we've got an ongoing feud with our neighbors.
They don't know.
They don't know about it, but we do. They have this obsession with that. Do you guys have wheelie bins?
Yeah, like wheelie garbage bins.
Yeah. So we have them obviously like out for collection, and for some fucking reason, I've got a neighbor who's obsessed with it, and he's like wheels it up and down his driveway. Like, I swear to God, every time we're recording, he's like, right, time to take out the bin. Off he goes. One time he went out of his house, looked in his bin, closed the bin, went back to his house, came back out, looked in his bin, closed. And every time he does it, we have to stop recording because it's loud.
Why?
And so,
why is he doing? What is the like purpose behind it?
Literally could not tell you, but it's so like, infuriating.
Yeah, because those wheelie bins are super loud.
They are, and they put them right. So like our fence, like the fence of the house, like my bedroom wall is here, and then their fence is here. Oh. So like they put them against the fence, and it's sorry, that's why we stopped, because Jamie saw him out the window and we were like, fuck, we're gonna have a wheelie bin noise, but I think he's gone back inside.
I think he might have just pulled up.
Yeah. Sorry. Carry on.
It's good. Is there anything else about the female characters that you want to say of note?
I love that Dean is terrified of Ellen.
Oh, it's so good. Good.
That is
rightfully
so. Like, he's like respectfully scared of her, and I think that is the exact reaction he should have.
Oh yes, and I love that he's like clocked that, and also that Joe has clocked that.
Yeah,
clocked the exact like Joe just like sees Dean and is like, I know exactly what your deal is, and she did that from her first episode, and I love it every time. Joe's just like, yeah, I know, and also like, what was the other thing I was gonna say? Oh. Actually, no, we'll talk about that later. That's not related to this. That's related to something else.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I had anything else on
specifically. No. I didn't even remember like them having that conversation. That's how insignificant it was.
It's like very insignificant.
Yeah. It's like
I only noticed it because I was like looking for it specifically when we were watching. Next is lore, and we kind of covered a bunch of this kind of already, but we've got more references to the man with the yellow eyes, saying coming to people in dreams, saying they're special, saying he has plans for them, which is like pretty much verbatim what we've gotten a few times. Like it's what the demon said to John about Sam.
It's interesting to note, and I can't remember if we brought this up when we covered these episodes or not, but like it seems to be that the demon is like he's only contacting certain of the children, like he's not coming to all of them in their dreams, which is interesting because you'd think that like everything else about how he's targeted, like obviously there's no clear definition as to why he's targeted each family at this point, but like there's a lot of patterns that they can track, like obviously like if the mother walks in, like they burn on the ceiling and like all these things. But
like if the mother walks in,
like you know how like we were talking about in one of the like because some of the mothers haven't died, and we were talking about like if the demon's interrupted,
Weber's adopted mom didn't die.
Right.
Yeah,
it's been so long since we've talked about any of the main plot that I've forgotten half of it.
Fair,
but so it's interesting, like the demon's obviously not contacting all of the children because Sam hasn't heard from him, like you know, and Andy clearly hasn't.
How rude, the demon left him on red.
Yeah, Sam's actively looking for him and he's like, nah.
But it's almost like I wonder like if the demon's only really communicating with the ones that are progressing with their powers in like really like intentional sort of like Weber talks about how he's like learned to control them.
Yeah.
And so he's like tapping into it.
Too.
Whereas Andy's just using it to kind of like dick around and like have
and
a good time.
And Sam's got no fucking idea what's going on. So
and Sam, if he did, he's only trying to like take out.
He would use it against the demon, I guess. So
maybe I don't know. That's a theory. I don't really have I don't know, but it's interesting. It is interesting with what we know so far.
Don't look at me. I never have any evidence to support my theories.
So far, every time you've brought up a theory, I've been very intrigued by it based on.
I love hearing so at the end of our episodes, for anyone who's not heard, I get Jamie to predict what she thinks is going to happen in the next episode purely based on the title.
I laugh so hard every time.
Some of her predictions are iconic.
I'm really mad that Hell House prediction was wrong.
Yeah, that's a really unfortunate one because it was a good prediction.
I was really excited for the episode I had in my brain.
Aren't we always?
Yeah, that's fair. Next is locations. This story, we kind of already talked about the locations where the story takes place at the Roadhouse, and it takes place in like, I don't think they state really where Andy is. I think we kind of assume it's close to there-ish. They don't seem to spend a lot of time traveling. Sort of undefined location. It's filmed all over Delta, the city that I know pretty well. But they also film a little bit at Capilano Regional Park, which my personal connection to that is that it has a really great suspension bridge in that park called the Capilano Suspension Bridge. And at Christmas time, they like, I don't know if they still do, but they put out just a ton of Christmas lights and like these big white orbs that hang everywhere, and you can like walk across the suspension bridge, and it's kind of magical because it's all like lit up.
Oh my god, that sounds amazing.
It's amazing. I've only been like one time because it's expensive, but it's magical.
Oh my god, it's now my life goal to go there.
Oh, it's very, and it's like the trees.
That sounds beautiful.
Very
Our next vacation plan, Beth?
Yes. That sounds
you ever make it to Canada?
Yeah. Look, give us a few years to get through the pandemic that shall not be named. And
also, I'm about to be broke again.
Yeah, that too. Very quickly, I have to go to the bathroom. I'm
so
sorry. I will be back.
I actually also do, so I'm going to also do that.
I will return.
Whoa, I'll chill here. That's fine.
I'm going to like pause the recording so that I don't have a bunch to cut out. If I can find the button. Here we go. Yeah, we're back.
All
right. Next is pop culture. There are a lot of references in this episode. There's a Bewitched reference. There is an O.J. Simpson reference. There's a reference to a bunch of philosophers and
a bunch of Star Wars.
Yeah, REO Speedwagon, and so much Star Wars. So much Star Wars. Which, goes along really well with the whole like
Obi-Wan Kenobi mind control thing.
Yeah.
It really like it's, and we've seen them make Star Wars references before, and they will continue to. But I never find them less delightful.
No.
Honestly. Did you say the part about you said yes, you did say the part
license
about the
plate?
License plate earlier.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember if that was
an essential part of the episode.
Do you know what's so funny is I had never noticed that before. So we were watching the episode and I was like, wait a minute. And
she
I
literally
paused it and I got up and I was like, look, Jamie.
And I'm there like, I'm blind, I can't see.
I got up and I stood in front of the TV so I could point at it and be like, look, it says this.
The things you notice after so many rewatches, right?
Yeah,
never noticed before.
I don't think I've noticed at this point you would think that I'd know everything there is to know, but look, I'm still learning.
Amazing. And last in our going meta, we have our gaydar section, which is really just sexuality and gender connections. And I have not a lot to say on this, except so you're going to hear in the episode. I'm going to try that again. If you've listened to the previous episode where we met Ash, KJ and I had a whole conversation about Ash and Dean and what we see as flirting that is happening in their first interaction because we choose to see it that way and nobody can stop us.
Everything is open for interpretation.
Exactly. Oh, I swear God.
And so
sorry.
Go ahead.
That phrasing just triggered me so hard.
Yes. If you know, you know.
If you know, you know.
Phrase, Beth.
Not in this fandom, it's not.
This fandom
Other reasons omitted.
Probably one of the most Yeah, that's probably one of the things. You just that goes in that's on bingo sheets. That's on
Yeah,
bingo
exactly.
sheets. For cons, for I don't know, no reason.
Normal fandom stuff.
But anyway, on that note, we have another interaction between Dean and Ash this episode, where Dean uses that nickname that Ash has given himself on his door, and I just found it funny.
I love it. I love that Ash's immediate response to them needing his help is like, oh, better put my pants on then. Like, I love him so much. He's such a great character.
He is such a great character. Every time he's on screen, I just want him to be on screen more because he cracks me up.
Yeah, no, same. And I love he's quite an interesting character to put in contrast to Ellen and Joe, because they're quite relatively down to earth serious characters, and he's just kind of there for the shits and giggles,
Yep.
Yep.
I would like to continue my campaign of let Ash say fuck 2K21 though.
Oh yes, because it just
feels
seems
like he deserves to be able to swear.
It seems that it's weird that he doesn't. It feels like it's a missing part of his dialogue.
Yeah. Oh, to be fair, it feels like it's a missing part of the dialogue of the show in general.
Oh, I follow this Twitter account. I don't remember its handle. If I remember it, I'll put it in the show notes. But it's just Supernatural, but if they were allowed to swear, and it's just people taking quotes and screen caps of quotes and putting the quote, but putting swear words in it. And I just love the account so much because half the time I read them and I'm like, wait, that wasn't what that dialogue was. It just I can hear it in my head in their voices.
Yeah, I can't wait until we get up to being able to talk about the ghost faces effect.
Yes.
I love that concept so much, and I can't wait to be able to share it properly with Jamie. And if anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, believe me when I say it's so fun and so interesting, especially from a meta perspective.
Oh, yes.
If you like meta and this show, the ghost faces effect is just, it's peak Supernatural, for so many reasons.
Oh, yes. and it's on the earlier end too. The show gets more meta as it goes along, but it's that's an early meta thing, which is awesome. Yeah. On a less funny note, in terms of gender, there is one comment that I wanted to make a note about that felt like it fit here better than anywhere else. So there's a moment when Dean and Sam are talking after, and they're talking about, and Dean's talking about being mind controlled and saying it doesn't count, and he says it's like being roofied, man, it doesn't count, basically being basically saying what I said when he was forcing me to tell the truth doesn't count. He says it's like being roofied, and just from that's a line that is really interesting from the gender perspective, and the coding of Dean as
a character,
and we going along with conversations we've had about how Dean, how many times Dean has been bait in the show so far, and how many times he is parentified in a motherly specific way. Just think that
we use a phrase quite often that I feel describes this really well, which is big yikes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the academic term. Big yikes.
Big yikes. Big yikes. Yeah.
I think this is sort of getting into some later episodes, but there is a episode down the track where roofies are actually involved, and Dean makes a point of being oh, they're roofies, and Sam's how do you know what a roofie looks like? And Dean's how do you not? What are you talking about? How do you not know what that looks like, dude? That's an essential safety thing.
Yeah.
And
the implication also, of that.
Yeah.
That Dean has had enough experiences that more than once in the show, he's identifying that he,
and
big yikes.
Big yikes. Big yikes.
Yeah. And then, there's also I don't want to get too into it because in case people are looking out for spoilers, or Jamie in general, who doesn't really know a lot.
The other room.
But there's a particular scene where, if you know what I'm talking about, you'll know, that was cut from quite a late season script, which talks about John using Dean as bait, particularly in the, do you know what I'm talking about?
Is that the one with
I
the
know
truck
what you're talking about.
drivers? I feel like I heard about that out of context.
Yes, that is the one I'm talking
Okay.
about.
Yeah.
And that in particular is very interesting in relation to this conversation, but also in terms of sort of closer to where we're at. I realized when I was listening back to our episode about Dead Man's Blood, there was a point that I meant to make about Dean and gender that I forgot. And it's very relevant to this. Do you mind if I hijack for just a second and talk about it? Because
please do.
I don't remember if you guys mentioned this in your episode either, but I was so angry with myself when I listened back to the edit and I was like, I can't believe I didn't make this point, which was when in Dead Man's Blood, Sam and John are arguing, and it's like, it's quite a dark scene, and it's Dean is standing between them and he's trying to break it up. I mean, all the scenes are dark, but look,
I just had to laugh at Dean.
And so you've got Sam and John who are arguing, and they're kind of front and center in the screen, and Dean's standing between them and looking. He's quite small in comparison because he's standing further back, and he's trying to come between them. And in our episode, we talked a bit about the dynamic of that. But what I realized I didn't mention was that Dean was 100% being framed as like the woman in those episodes where it's like, boys don't fight. Like, no, like, I don't want you to fight over me. I don't want you to fight about this.
Yeah. Yeah. Because and the implication that they're fighting over him, which they are.
Yeah.
Though they don't directly say it in that episode.
Indirectly.
And they also use the visual shorthand that a lot of TV shows and movies use to, highlight, how weak and powerless the woman is as she tries to split up the big, strong men. They use the same framing techniques that are really common in those sort of scenes.
And it's right hitting them on the chest. Like even that, like,
that's true.
Chest, it's such a like stereotype trope that is used with women breaking up men's fights all the time.
And then the woman then choosing which one to go with and like which one to like he grabs Sam and moves Sam and goes like and like
he's like, okay, you're my
Sam.
Man in this context. I'm gonna remove you because like it's that stupid thing of like, as a woman, you become responsible for the male like that you're representing, I guess. Like, so the one that you've aligned yourself with, you end up being like, okay, I'm responsible for your actions, even though that is the most stupid like possible thing. So he's like, I'm going to take responsibility for Sam and I'm going to remove him from the situation. And I'll just let John figure himself out. And so I realized because I never brought it up and I was like, this is so relevant to this topic. I just wanted to like bring it up now.
No, thank you for doing that. And it's also like in that episode, it's also like not right before, but it's a little bit before, like later on in that episode, Dane is bait. And again, a shot that is the traditional female shot of a female character being bait. Like the one
replace Dane with Megan Fox and you've got a Transformers shot.
It's kind of like that thing where like you could interchange Dean Winchester and Buffy Summers.
Yes.
They're just, you can just flip them. Like Dean could do like, I'm shaking in my stylish yet affordable boots, like
and has said lines like that before.
Exactly.
Like has said lines that are very much that. And even this line, as like tragic as this and big yikes as this line is a line like that, where like it's the kind of line that like a female character casually says to indicate the kind of experiences they've had in the world based on the way they're perceived by society. And like Dean is being codified in that same way. Very, very interesting. We'll come back to it again because we always do. We find ways.
I really love actually like when I'm listening to your podcast, I love listening to you talking about like your gaydar and like gender section because it is so interesting to get like everybody has their own subjective experience in these areas, and it's so fascinating to get like everyone's perspectives and like how they interpret scenes based on their own subjective experiences.
Oh, for sure.
Like it's fascinating to me, and it makes it richer.
I think that's what's been really cool about having those conversations and having them with a variety of different people who like we have on our show, we have a mix of trans and cis people, we have like a mix of like experiences in terms of like childhood and currently and different like elements of queer relationships, and it means that everyone brings something differently to the text, so to speak, and then take stuff out of it, which is cool. I like it. So I appreciate you two bringing in your perspectives on it. So our last thing today is Q&A. And so in this, we are attempting to propose an answer to something the episode doesn't answer, particularly relating to like writing, filming, acting. So, and Jamie, you'd be great because you really have no idea. And I'm actually going to ask, so if you are listening to this episode and you would like to submit a question for a future episode, send us a voicemail or tag us on TikTok or Twitter or send us a message. All the links are in the description. We'd love to answer any burning questions you have, or, attempt an answer and you can argue with us about it. That's fine too. So today my question is actually going to be the same question that I talked about in the previous episode, 2 episodes ago with KJ, because I want to hear your opinions on it as well. Okay, more. And it's actually also going to be related to Ash. So my question is, what's Ash's backstory? Because we don't know it. How does he get into this life? Because he's not related to Joe and Ellen, as far as we know. We know very little about him. What is his do you have a proposed backstory? How does Ash end up at the Roadhouse with Joe and Ellen? Because he seems like a brother to Joe, and we don't have any reason.
I've never ever thought about this, but now that you've said it, I can't believe I've never thought about this. That is what.
And like the fandom doesn't talk about it. I've not really heard a compelling this is the the fandom has a theory for everything, and I've never heard a theory for this.
Do you know what is hilarious is that I have read thousands of fan fictions, and in so many of them it's
Ash is just there.
This AU where Bobby and Ellen are married, and Ellen's Joe is Bobby's stepdaughter, and that's how they know Dean, and or Charlie is in there somehow or whatever. And they are all they use the characters and they give them their own families and their reasons for being there. Genuinely, has anyone ever given Ash parents?
No, I've never. I also have read many. I've never seen Ash's parents. Never seen he's never I've very rarely seen him stuck as a sibling to anyone else. He's usually
never
just
seen him as a sibling either. He just kind of exists. He's in his own. He's like a little void.
Yeah, who are you and where did you come from?
That is so bizarre. I can't believe I've never thought about it. I'm very excited now to listen to that episode because I want to know what you guys have already said. Do you have a thought? What comes to your mind?
Well, I'm just trying to think of what we have been told about Ash's backstory, and all we got was that he dropped out of MIT, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the only thing we've been told. And that he's a genius. That's what Joe said. He's a genius. He said he's dropped out of MIT. He likes crappy beer.
He has a mullet.
He doesn't value his work enough.
Oh God. Okay. So I can think of how. All right. I think I've got something.
Just remember, we are guests on this podcast. No existential crises today.
I'll try not to have
how
a crisis.
To pronounce that. Sorry.
I'm well known for my crises, but look, I'll do my best. Okay. So my theory is that Ash was born to, I'm going to say, because we actually don't know what, his name is Ash, but what's Ash short for, right? It could be Ashley, I guess. I'm going to say that his name is short for Ashland, something quite formal, because he was born into high society with very well-to-do parents, right? Very strict, very absent as per Supernatural generally.
Then grew a mullet and they disowned him.
So he was raised in this well-to-do land, and that's how he got to have the opportunity to go to a school like MIT. And then but it just wasn't really for him. He just wasn't feeling it. It's not his vibe. And so when he went off to school, he was oh, actually I don't really want to do that. And so he dropped out of MIT, and I reckon somehow the black market is involved, because we know how hunters need their their various random ingredients. I feel maybe Ash was somehow involved in the black market hunter trading.
Ooh. Do you think he has a really popular
like an
Etsy
Etsy.
page.
Yeah.
He has the black market version of an Etsy shop for hunters.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how he got connections with hunters. He was like, I need a job because I'm like leaving MIT. And they were like, oh, we can hook you up. And then that's how he started working at the Roadhouse.
Does he actually work at the Roadhouse though?
I don't know.
Or does he just work out of the
Does
Roadhouse?
he?
I figured he just like rented a room or something like at the
It's
Roadhouse.
really hard to tell. Again, it's like Joe kind of treats him like a sibling. So you kind of get the impression that he lives there.
I've seen a post floating around Tumblr about how Supernatural spent a lot of time building a world, but then kind of forgot to build a world. And this just seems like one of these holes.
Yeah, it's just like a very big hole.
Yeah, I think I actually reblogged this onto our Tumblr, or at least it's on our queue. So if you're interested, you can go back and find it. But I'm pretty sure the post was something along the lines of like, Supernatural is kind of like one of those video games where like, if anything is like out of the zone of like the playable character, it's just like frozen in time and doesn't do anything. Like it hasn't loaded in yet. It's like we don't get close enough to Ash to populate his backstory.
Right. We don't even get a fucking last name for him.
Exactly.
He does not exist except when they need something in the episodes he's in.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love that theory. I love it.
Did you have a theory, Jamie?
I mean, I have lots of theories. I don't know how
you cannot be wrong.
You cannot be wrong. We literally know nothing
impossible.
more than we know now. I don't think we know anything else substantial about him ever.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so I feel like for the sake of balance, I've got to go to the opposite of Beth.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
He was dirt poor, raised a foster kid, managed to pull himself together enough to like get into MIT. He's mirroring Sam now. He's getting a full ride scholarship. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
We know how much they like their mirrors and parallels.
It's true. Boy. I'm liking this.
Tech boy at MIT. That's his new email address. And then something happened where he was confronted with the supernatural, which tanked his grades, made him lose his full ride scholarship to MIT. I'm going tragic with this backstory. Okay. Yeah. He lost his scholarship to MIT. He sort of was then just searching for a cheap place to live and work so that he wouldn't be broke and destitute on the street. He'd come across the Roadhouse. He met Joe and Ellen. They had solutions and they had answers for his questions. And from there, they worked out that his skills that he developed at MIT before he got kicked out were actually really useful in that. And that's when he sort of stepped into the role of Dr. Badass, who acquires things and does research for other hunters and gets paid not enough
to do it.
He gets paid in shitty beer.
Yeah. Do you know, I think, does Ash tell us why he left MIT? I feel like he does. Like maybe did he get kicked out for fighting?
I'm gonna look it up because I'm pulling it up on a wiki. He thrown out for fighting.
Hey, there you go.
It says this wiki says he arrived at the Roadhouse in March of 2001, but I don't.
Based on what?
There's a citation, so I'm gonna pull up the citation. I don't see. Okay, this citation is not. Oh, Joe's journal. So it's like a semi-canon. So that's up for interpretation. There's a few things they note. Oh, that's really funny. Oh, I forgot this. So the actor was also in Fast and the Furious. And his character is told at one point in Fast and the Furious, you should be going to MIT or something. Which I remember when I saw Fast and the Furious, like saw it. I like laughed because I was like, wait a sec. This is very niche, but I need them to be in the same universe now because.
Oh, that's so funny.
Though, okay.
The supernatural universe, honestly, like connecting supernatural to things is way easier than people would think. Like it's everywhere. Okay. I can't, as Jamie was talking, I was like, I have a theory that's kind of related. Because we know so little about Ash, we can believe it. So what if Ash is another one of the special children? What if Ash is connected
to all of this because he has this like genius level like intelligence, which like maybe is just him being intelligent.
I think they call it technopathy if it's like specifically technology related, like sort of
ingenuity,
ingenuity and telekinesis, and being able to. I'm gonna Google it to make sure my phrasing is right.
And like he is an expert hacker, and he is able to track the demon, which would be really fascinating if part of the reason he's able to track him is because of the connection.
Yeah, technopathy, a psychic ability to control electronic machinery and or read electronic signals.
That as a theory is inspired.
Also because you know what's happening, you know what's coming.
Yeah,
it works with what's coming at the end of season 2.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah,
it like. Also, apparently, according to this wiki, again, there's no citation here, so I'm like, but I think this might be a like later reference, but it says he's fluent in Enochian, which
do you know what?
I think that might be a later thing.
I'm trying
to remember.
Really say anything because of Jamie, but I'm pretty sure when he comes when he comes up in a different location in a later season, I'm pretty sure he's learned.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think, I'm assuming you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do know what you're talking about. Yeah, that makes sense. It also apparently the actor also was in Buffy, and he also played a computer genius / hacker.
Wait, who did he play in Buffy?
He played one named David Kirby in season 1, and he fell under the influence of a demon. After he refused to kill Buffy, he was murdered. So like the Buffy Supernatural crossover universe is real. And
Ash is God!
Yeah.
Look at him!
Yeah.
Oh, what a little baby!
Yeah.
Oh, that's honestly like the Supernatural universe is just, you know how like there's that whole theory about like 6 degrees of separation?
Yeah.
Supernatural is like 2 degrees.
It's like 2 degrees.
You find it everywhere. It's like, I think the tagline on our Tumblr, we had it initially as something along the lines of like, everything's about supernatural if you dig down deep enough, because like it's just everywhere.
Not even very deep. You just need like you don't even need like a shovel. You just need like one of those little kiddie shovels.
Yeah.
And then you just like scrape up some dirt and you're like, there it is.
Quite genuine. You need like a leaf blower. Like you'll find it.
It'll be there. Amazing. Well, finally today we have our fic rec of the week, and I tried to find a good fic with Ash at the center, but again, this fandom has severely neglected him as a character, and I couldn't find anything when I was looking. So I'm going to recommend a fic from many years ago that actually isn't even like the writer has like, their stuff has all disappeared, but I found an archive of it because it was a fic that I like loved years and years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's not related to this episode at all, but here we are. It's called No Line on the Horizon. But it is a like pre-series season 1 era, sort of Stanford era fic.
Ooh, love that.
And I don't want to like give away, it's not very long. I don't want to give away sort of punchline of it, but it's like, it is a dean goes to get Sam at Stanford, but for a different reason than the show does, for a different, more tragic reason. And
intriguing.
And it is sad. It's a fic that's made me cry. I do recommend it. And I will put the link to a version of it that you can still find on the internet in the show notes, because it's not on fanfiction.net anymore. Because that's where it was hosted.
Fanfiction.net just threw me back.
Yeah, like it was a fanfiction.net fic. It was like one of the first fics I ever read. It was one of the fics that made me like first love supernatural fanfic. I've been reading other fanfic since I was very small, and I was reading Narnia fanfic.
Was the gateway.
It was Narnia for me. I was reading Narnia reading and writing Narnia fanfic before I knew what fanfic was.
See, because I was Percy Jackson.
Oh, nice. Again, we've got we've got the classics here.
Between the three of us, look at us go. We're really completing the trifecta.
So that'll be my recommendation for today.
Look, it could have been a worse trifecta. It could be Super Hulock.
Oh. No.
Oh no.
Oh. Sometimes. Yeah. Anyway, that is the end. Got it again.
On that note, let's wrap this up before we get anywhere worse.
Yeah. Yes, there we go. You've segued me perfectly into it. That is going to be the end of our show. You can subscribe to Driver Picks the Podcast, our version, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can subscribe to the other Driver Picks the Podcast with Jamie and Beth, also wherever you get your podcasts. You could just subscribe to both of them. Honestly, we both make great things. And you can come talk to us on social media or submit a question for future episode. All the links are in the show notes, including to Jamie and Beth's show. And yes, is there anything you would like to say as closing thoughts or any plug you'd like to give for your...
I mean, nothing we'd like to plug because you've just done an excellent job of plugging us. So thank you. But I think just generally, like, honestly, like, I mean, I'm going to speak for both of us, but I assume that it's the truth. It's like, we have had like such a blast. This has been so fun. So I really hope that everyone listening has enjoyed having us and has had as much fun listening as we have had chatting with you, because like, honestly, this has been so much fun. I'm really glad that, obviously we have two podcasts named the same thing, which would seem like a bad thing, but honestly it's turned into like the best accident. So yes. I'm really thrilled that you reached out and like said like, hey, like, let's do something, because honestly, like, it's really been so much fun and I would like be so happy to come back and do it again. So
yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and I would be thrilled to have you again. So yes, you're welcome anytime.
Oh, and it is worth mentioning that Abigail will be joining us for an episode of our podcast, which will come out a little while after this, like probably a few months.
But
we're allowed to record it right now, but look.
We are both behind on releasing schedule and ahead on recording schedule. So it's a lovely combo.
So thank you to everyone who is listening for coming along for the ride. We wish you a peaceful road until we meet again. Next week, we are joined by Francis, Let It Be Love 93 on TikTok. And we are going to be discussing season 2, episode 6, No Exit, through the theme of jealousy. A note to our listeners. This episode was recorded prior to our season 3 name change, where we went from Driver Picks the Podcast to Saving People, Queering Things. For all of our new social media platforms, visit queeringthingspodcast.com.